There is a grave in Riverside Memorial Cemetery with Diana Reeves carved into the headstone. The date of death reads March 14th. There are flowers on it, fresh ones, replaced every week for 6 months. A husband who wept at the funeral. A best friend who held his hand the entire time. Neighbors who brought casseroles. A pastor who preached about God calling the good ones home too soon. And somewhere, 30 yards from that cemetery on the day of the burial, hidden behind a line of oak trees with mud on her shoes and tears she refused to let fall, Diana Reeves stood alive, watching every single second of it. She was not dead. She had never been dead. But she needed them to believe she was. Because what she had discovered 3 weeks before that funeral was worse than death. And what she was about to build, quietly, carefully, without a single person knowing she was still breathing, would take everything from the 2 people who had tried to take everything from her. This is not a story about a woman who survived. This is a story about a woman who planned. Diana Reeves was 31 years old when her world ended the first time. Not the night of the staged accident. Not the night she stood in the trees watching strangers cry over an empty casket. The first ending came on a Tuesday in February, 6 weeks before her supposed death, when she picked up Marcus's phone to silence an alarm and saw a message that rewrote every memory she had. She and Marcus had been married for 9 years. They had 2 daughters, Amara, who was 12 and already too perceptive for anyone's comfort, and Zoe, who was 8 and still believed the world was fundamentally kind. They had a house in a quiet suburb outside Atlanta with a kitchen Diana had renovated herself, tile by tile, weekend by weekend. They had date nights and inside jokes and a shared savings account with 11 years of careful deposits sitting in it. They had what looked, from the outside, like a life built on solid ground. Marcus Reeves was an operations manager at a logistics firm. Tall, composed, the kind of man who remembered to take the trash out and remembered everyone's coffee order and said the right thing at the right moment. Diana had trusted him in the specific, unthinking way you trust a person you have built a life with, not because you checked, but because it had never occurred to you that checking was necessary. Vivian Cole had been Diana's best friend since college. 15 years. Maid of honor at the wedding. Godmother to Amara. The woman Diana called at midnight when her mother was diagnosed and at 2 in the afternoon when she just needed to laugh. Vivian was brilliant and warm and the kind of friend who showed up without being asked. Diana had loved her without reservation. The message on Marcus's phone was from Vivian. It was not the first message. It was not the 20th. And it was not about friendship. Diana did not confront him that night. Something stopped her, not fear, not denial, but a cold and unfamiliar instinct that told her to wait. To look further before she moved. So she waited until Marcus left for work the next morning, and then she started looking. What she found in the first hour shook her. What she found by the end of the week changed the entire shape of the situation. The affair had been running for 2 years. 2 years of coordinated lies, covered schedules, and a level of collaboration between Marcus and Vivian that went far beyond romance. Diana found deleted email threads she recovered through a shared family tablet. She found a separate phone number Marcus used only to contact Vivian. She found receipts for hotel stays, weekend trips, a piece of jewelry Diana had never seen. But the affair, devastating as it was not the worst part. The worst part was the insurance policy. 14 months before that Tuesday in February, Marcus had quietly increased Diana's life insurance policy to $1.2 million. He had done it without mentioning it, which was unusual, but not alarming on its own. People adjusted insurance. Except Diana also found a conversation, buried in a deleted folder on the shared tablet, in which Marcus and Vivian had discussed the policy by name. Discussed the payout. Discussed a timeline. Discussed making it look like an accident on a road Diana drove alone every Thursday night after her late shift at the hospital where she worked as a charge nurse. She read that conversation 3 times. Then she sat on the kitchen floor and breathed for a very long time. Her husband and her best friend were not just having an affair. They were planning to kill her. Most people, reading that sentence, would immediately call the police. Diana thought about it. She thought about it carefully. And then she thought about what the police would actually find: deleted messages on a shared tablet, a recovered folder, a conversation that Marcus and Vivian could claim was fiction, dark humor, a misunderstanding. She thought about Marcus's composed demeanor, his ability to say the right thing at the right moment. She thought about Vivian's warmth, her credibility, the way people instinctively trusted her. And she thought about her daughters, Amara and Zoe, who were currently asleep upstairs while their father planned their mother's murder in the kitchen below. Diana was a charge nurse. She had spent 12 years making calm decisions under pressure. She knew how to assess a situation and act without panic. And what she assessed, sitting on that kitchen floor, was this: if she confronted Marcus now, the evidence disappeared and she could not prove a thing. If she went to the police now, the case was thin and Marcus would know she knew. But if she gave them exactly what they were planning, if she gave them a death, then she had time. Time to build something airtight. Time to protect her daughters. Time to turn their plan into the thing that destroyed them. She called her brother Raymond the next morning. Raymond was 53, retired military, and the only person in Diana's life she trusted completely. She told him everything. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he said 5 words. "What do you need from me?" They had 3 weeks. Diana spent every one of them in 2 simultaneous lives. On the surface, she was a wife and mother and charge nurse going through the motions of an ordinary February. She cooked dinner. She helped Zoe with homework. She smiled at Marcus across the kitchen table and felt nothing except a focused, clarifying anger she kept very carefully below the surface. Underneath, she and Raymond were building. Raymond had contacts from his military years, people who understood documentation, discretion, and how to move quietly. Through those contacts, Diana established a secondary identity with enough paper behind it to hold up under basic scrutiny. She opened a separate bank account and began moving small amounts of money, amounts that would not trigger alerts, out of the joint savings. Not all of it. Enough to survive on while she disappeared. She also began documenting everything. Every recovered message, printed and stored in 2 physical locations Raymond controlled. Every insurance document, photographed. A detailed written timeline of everything she had found, notarized and sealed in an envelope Raymond deposited with an attorney he trusted. On the night of March 14th, a Thursday, the night Marcus and Vivian had chosen, Diana drove her usual route home from the hospital. She pulled off at the designated point, left the car running with specific items inside it, and walked into the darkness. Raymond picked her up a quarter-mile down the road in a vehicle registered to neither of them. The car burned. The police were called. The identification inside confirmed Diana Reeves. The medical examiner, working from what was available, ruled it consistent with a fatal accident. Marcus got the call at 11:17 that night. Raymond, parked 2 streets away, listened to a police scanner and watched the timestamp. Diana, sitting in the passenger seat, stared straight ahead and said nothing. She almost did not go. Raymond told her it was a risk she did not need to take. Diana told him she needed to see it with her own eyes. They compromised. She would observe from distance, fully covered, no closer than the tree line at the cemetery's eastern edge. What she saw from those trees she would carry for the rest of her life. Marcus wept. Not quietly, openly, with his shoulders shaking and his face in his hands. Neighbors she had known for 7 years surrounded him with arms and condolences. The pastor spoke about a woman of grace and dedication. Amara stood rigid and dry-eyed in a way that broke Diana's heart, already understanding at 12 that something in the world had permanently shifted. Zoe cried steadily and held on to Marcus's arm without letting go. Vivian stood beside Marcus throughout the service. She had worn black, appropriate and understated. She held his hand during the pastor's remarks. Her face was composed into the expression of a grieving best friend. And when the casket, empty, sealed, prepared by a funeral home that had received what they believed to be proper documentation, was lowered into the ground, Vivian placed her hand on Marcus's back. Diana watched all of it. She did not move. She did not make a sound. And when it was over and the mourners began to disperse, she walked back through the trees to where Raymond was waiting and got into the car. They drove in silence for 11 minutes. Then Diana said, quietly, without emotion, 6 more months. Then we move. She lived with Raymond in a small house 2 states away. She did not contact her daughters. This was the hardest part, not the hiding, not the discipline, not the construction of the case. The silence toward Amara and Zoe was a specific kind of pain she managed the only way she knew how, by working. She worked every day. Raymond's attorney connected them with a federal contact who, once presented with Diana's documentation, became very interested in Marcus Reeves. It turned out that the insurance fraud Diana had uncovered was not Marcus's first. There was a prior claim, smaller, from a previous relationship, that had always carried a question mark in a file somewhere. Diana's evidence gave that file context. The federal investigation ran parallel to Diana's private case. She cooperated fully, provided everything she had, and was told to remain hidden until they were ready to move. Meanwhile, Marcus and Vivian had wasted no time. The insurance claim was filed within the first month. It was processed, flagged internally by the investigator already watching the account, and deliberately slow-walked while the case was built. By month 4, Marcus and Vivian were living together in the house Diana had renovated tile by tile. By month 5, Marcus had proposed. By month 6, the wedding date was set. Raymond showed Diana the announcement. A social media post. A photo of Marcus and Vivian, smiling, a ring on her finger, a caption about new beginnings and honoring the past. Diana looked at it for a long time. Then she told Raymond, "I want to be there." The wedding was held on a Saturday in September at a venue 40 minutes outside Atlanta. 112 guests. An outdoor ceremony with white chairs and strung lights and a string quartet. Marcus stood at the altar in a charcoal suit looking like a man who had grieved appropriately and moved forward with his life. Federal agents arrived at the venue at 2:47 in the afternoon, 17 minutes before the ceremony was scheduled to begin. They did not come in loudly. They positioned themselves at the exits, identified their targets, and waited. Diana walked through the main entrance at 2:51. She had not been to a hair salon in 6 months. She had lost weight she had not tried to lose. The small scar on her left cheekbone from the night of the staged accident, an unplanned detail, a branch she had not seen in the dark, was still visible. She wore a plain dress and flat shoes, and she walked through that venue the way a woman walks when she has already won. The room noticed her before Marcus did. A guest near the entrance went still. Then another. A low sound moved through the gathered crowd, not screaming, not chaos, but the specific silence of a room collectively losing its understanding of what was real. Marcus saw her when she was 12 feet from the altar. Whatever composure he had maintained for 6 months left his face completely in that moment. Vivian turned a second later. And Diana stopped walking, stood in the center of that room, and looked at both of them without saying a single word. She did not need to. The federal agents moved at 3 o'clock exactly. Marcus Reeves was charged with conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and wire fraud. Vivian Cole was charged as a co-conspirator. The federal case, built on Diana's documentation and supported by the prior insurance irregularity and the intercepted claim, was described by the prosecutor as one of the most thoroughly prepared private evidentiary packages she had seen from a civilian. Marcus's attorney entered a not guilty plea. It did not hold. By the time the trial concluded, both Marcus and Vivian were looking at sentences that would consume the better part of the next 2 decades of their lives. Diana was given full custody of Amara and Zoe. The first night all 3 of them were back in the Atlanta house, the house with the kitchen Diana had renovated, with the mugs on the left side of the sink exactly where they belonged. Zoe climbed into her mother's lap and stayed there for an hour without speaking. Amara sat across the table and watched them with the careful eyes of a girl who had suspected the truth longer than anyone knew. Diana did not move the mugs. She did not change a single thing in that kitchen. She had built that house. She had every right to it. There is still a grave in Riverside Memorial Cemetery with Diana Reeves carved into the headstone. Diana has not removed it. She visits it sometimes, not often, but sometimes, and stands in front of it for a few minutes the way you stand in front of a version of yourself you had to bury in order to survive. She always leaves before anyone sees her. She has always known when it is time to disappear. And she has always known when it is time to come back.